Well, my next guest on the Lax Goalie Rat podcast is a lacrosse Hall of Famer. I think it's the first Hall of Famer I've had. It's Scott Bacigalupo. How do you even say your last name, Scott? Scott Bacigalupo.
You got it. You were almost there. Bacigalupo. You got it.
Bacigalupo. I'm going to call you Batch.
There you go.
I'm going to call you Batch for the rest of the show. How's that work?
Go. When people call me Batch, they must be a friend. So go right ahead.
There you go. There you go. Well, welcome to the show. It's an honor. It's going to be so much fun. I always ask goalies very first question. Do you remember the very first time that you jumped into goal?
I do. I think every goalie out there ought to remember the first time they ever jumped into goal. So I was a baseball player, and I think all goalies will relate to my story, or I relate to a lot of other people's stories. But I was a baseball player growing up. So one time I was a little leaguer and I played baseball. I went to a public school down in Baltimore, and then in the fifth grade, my parents changed, and I went to a private school in Baltimore called St. Paul's School for Boys. And back when I went, just a long time ago, in the spring, if you can believe this, they didn't have baseball. They only offered one sport, which was lacrosse. And St. Paul's is known as a powerhouse lacrosse school. So they only offered one sport at that point. So you really had to they really made everyone play it in the spring. So my fifth grade year, I didn't play. I still played baseball for my travel team. And then in sixth grade, I tried out for the sixth grade lacrosse team. And as you can imagine, I was terrible. I went out as a midfielder or whatever. I wanted to play in the field. And at St. Paul's, as I said, they had a history, great players. At sixth grade at that point, there's a ton of great players on the team. And so I'm sure I didn't even see the field at that point as a midfielder. And so at the end of the year, our coach, this guy named Coach Wilkie Wilkerson, great guy. We had like this end of the year fun game. And he basically said to everyone, just play whatever position you want to go play. We're just going to scrimmage amongst ourselves. And the reason why I remember my first time ever playing goalie was because I said, I'll play goalie. I'd love to try. And so he said, great. And so I put on the equipment. I put on my chest protector. I put on my helmet, my gloves, and obviously I got a goalie stick. And I took an elbow pad and I put that down my shorts as my cup to protect myself. So I used the elbow pad because that's all we had back then. To do it, and I hopped into the goal at the end of my sixth grade year, and amazingly enough, we played, and I guess I made a bunch of different saves, and so the coach Wilkerson, after the game, came up to me and said, you're quite good. I really liked what I saw, and at St. Paul's we have this tradition. We have a goalie in every grade, and the goalie in my grade was actually leaving to go to a different school. And he said, so you should really think about playing goalie and being that goalie for your grade as you go. And so I went home and probably didn't think about it. And Coach Wilkerson actually called my parents. And so I said, sure, I'll give it a try. And so as I guess they say, the rest is history. So to your question, David, my first time playing goalie, I had an elbow pad for a cup. And I was the end of the sixth grade, and I think like many goalies that are out there, not many goalies start as goalies in lacrosse, right? They somehow figure a way into the goalie position, and so I'm sure my story, like many, resonate to how they ultimately got to that spot.
Yeah, that's funny. I'm sure they eventually gave you a cup, right?
Right. I think my parents eventually bought me a cup, but yes, at some point I finally got a cup.
Yeah. That's a very common story. Most folks, who have made it to, some elite level of lacrosse in the goalie position started out as a midi because there's so many or attack or some, position in the field because there's so many transferable skills. I mean, just learning the sport and learning how to catch and learning how to throw as a midi is directly transferable to the position of goalie. So I think that's a pretty common story.
I don't disagree with that. I'll tell you another little thing is in baseball is actually a catcher. So that was my position in baseball was a catcher. And so I think when I first played goalie in sixth grade, I think I was so used to trying to block a ball
Mhm.
and go and you know, as most goalies will attest, you know, the hardest thing in playing a goalie is stepping towards the ball, right? You have somebody who's shooting a ball towards you. And, you know, as I've told many young goalies who have helped train or coach or, you know, taught, the most unnatural act that a person can do is going towards something that's shot at you, right? I mean, your natural a willingness is to duck, right? You
Right.
duck when somebody throws something at you. And so, you know, playing goalie in lacrosse, your job is to actually go towards the ball and step towards it. And that's pretty unnatural. So I think I was blessed with being a catcher in baseball. And then when I first did it, I must have I mistakenly done it, but I must have done it quite well when I first did it. So
Yeah. So did you, because you're very right about that. Like when you watch tape of youth goalies, you know, who are just getting started, like and at the moment the shot is released, it's like, you know, you
yeah,
get small, you close your eyes, like your knees come inwards. It's all these fear reactions because it's not a natural thing. It's definitely not a natural thing. And we're very under padded, if you ask me. It's a whole other conversation, but the
yes.
fear response is very natural. So when you first started out, was that something that's not something that you had to deal with very strongly?
I didn't. And that's why I would say I think I was. Yeah. Look, I don't know why, but I was very blessed. I know I was never scared of the ball, and I know I was very aggressive towards the ball, stepping towards it, and so I never had that issue. I never was fearful. I was never ducking. I never had any of that. I never. And once again, I know that whether it makes me smarter or not very smart. But it allowed me to learn how to play goalie without being fearful. You know, it's funny. You talk about fearful, by the way. You know, note to every coach out there who deals with young goalies. You know, the worst thing you can do to a young goalie is hurt them. So when you're dealing with someone who's 8 or 9 or 10 or 11 or 12 or 13 years old or whatever it is, you know, your whole job as a goalie coach or someone who is helping a kid play goalie is to help them with their confidence and shoot the ball an appropriate speed to allow them to be a good goalie. I can't tell you how many times I look across the field. I coach a lot of different teams, girls and boys teams, and I'll look across and I'll watch a guy warming up the goalie, and they are just firing it at 100 miles an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And you pop a goalie once or twice at a younger age, it doesn't feel so good, as we all know. And the worst thing you can do is not only break confidence, to actually make them be fearful of the ball, right? So there's a reason why people warm up goalies with tennis balls, softer balls, whatever it is, but to get them kind of used to getting hit, and then it becomes a little bit more rote memory in their minds to step towards the ball. So so I always caution coaches and goalie coaches, don't, you got to create confidence and don't hurt goalies, because that's the killer, right? If you
Yeah.
see a kid ducking, that's the end. They're just
Yeah.
not going to be a goalie when they're ducking.
Oh, I 100% agree with you. And then those are the same folks that, you know, go on the lacrosse forums and say, I can't get anybody to play goalie. Like, how do you guys, you know, recruit goalies? And, you know, part of it is just creating this atmosphere that goalies want to be a part of. You know, part of
Totally.
that is how you train them, but also the other part of that is like, what's the culture of the goalie on the team? Like, you know, are they respected? Are they the first in line in the handshakes? Are you making sure the team's getting them, you know, giving them
That's
a
right.
hug after the game? So have you created that culture of
That's right.
respect? And then guess what? You're going to have 4 or 5 people that want to play goalie.
I agree with you 100%. And also, you know, not only that first culture, that first person culture, right? At the end of the game. Yeah. I love, and it's happened for a while, but I love the teams when the game ends and you've won or lost and all the team goes to the goalie first, right? I think that's a great great tradition and what every team should be. You know, the other thing, just to go back a little bit too, is, you know, in the youth levels, the college levels, it's much different, obviously, but in the youth levels, I always think it's interesting too, because most of the time they never actually warm up the goalies before games, right? It's all about shuttles, and the kids are all, you know, attack and midfielder, defensemen are doing their stuff. but you rarely see people get warmed up. And I'm always like, the whole point is to warm up the goalie, right? You got to warm them up and get them ready to play. But to your point, it's that, making sure that goalie feels like, they're on the team, they feel entitled, they're in the most important position. I mean, I'm biased, but I think it's the most important position on the field. And so, making sure that they're being included in all that stuff. So it's interesting, but I agree with you. I think the goalie, they should, all the traditions around the goalie first thing is a great one.
Yeah. So going back to your story at St. Paul's, when, you decided to be a goalie, was it, and this, this had to be what, like late 80s or maybe, yeah.
Yeah. So
late 80s. Like, was it all about like, here, figure it out on your own, or did you have some coaching, or how did you go about learning the position?
So Damon, great question. I've said this many a times. I was blessed by where I grew up and the school I went to and the environment I was to be a goalie. St. Paul's school has a history of great goalies. Edgar Boyd back in the 30s, and Dr. Les Matthews, who went to Hopkins in the 60s, and Peter Sheehan, who was above me, who went to UVA in the 80s, and it's even continued obviously post me. AJ Barretto at West Point, and Alex Rode, who's the goalie at UVA now. So we've had this great history or tradition of goalies at St. Paul's, and obviously it was well before me. So I will tell you a couple of things that helped me. One, as I said, there was a lot of focus around goalies at St. Paul's. And so when I raised my hand after 6th grade and said, I want to play goalie, I can't tell you the number of goalie coaches who came out and helped me. Not only St. Paul's alumni, but Johns Hopkins alumni and the likes. And they took a lot of interest in me. And, in the summer before my 7th grade year, and then every, summer or spring, I just had great coaching. My varsity coach, my last couple of years at St. Paul's was Mitch Whiteley. Mitch Whiteley is a legendary coach down in Bolton High School. He's won a couple of state championships, but Mitch was a goalie at Dartmouth. And so obviously he took great interest in myself and helping me learn the other things. So like, I can't tell you how many Hall of Famers, all Americans came and would work with me. My fundamentals, my steps, the way to think about the game, all that stuff. Like I had it all, and I was kind of in this hotbed. And so I'm not saying it was easy, but I was quite fortunate with the people that had surrounded me when I decided to play goalie, and really helped me along, my young career when I was at St. Paul's.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome, because a lot of goalies, they're not from those hotbeds and they want to learn the position, and that's really like the main reason I've created all this Lax Goalie Rat stuff is to try and give those folks the same experience that you had, because I know there's tons of goalies out there who went through it and learned it and are now like they love to give back, and I'm sure you kind of feel the same way.
I can't agree with you anymore. And as I said, there's a lot of great goalies out there that, to your point, they have. I think they just go figure it out, and that's great too. I mean, going and figuring out a different path. My path was built upon, as I said, the Les Matthews and Peter Sheehan's and Mitch Whiteley's and a lot of others really spending time with me and teaching me the fundamentals of playing the position. And I can't, I've thanked them enough in my lifetime, but they were instrumental in helping me along the way.
Yeah. Now, did they, let me show you this picture I've got here. I think if I share my screen, I have to edit this out of you see this picture right here?
Sure. Yes.
Yeah. So I got a picture of you, and I'll kind of post it. Now, is this the style that they taught you? Because when I watch you play, it's certainly like a unique style. Very, very upright in the stance. Like you're probably like what, 6 foot 6'1", like as tall as the goal.
Yeah.
Very very relaxed with the hands. Like, how did that style come to be?
That's a great picture. We're playing Harvard. This looks like my freshman year at Princeton, to be perfectly honest with you. My style, I don't, if you talk to Bill Tierney, who was my coach at Princeton, or Dave Metzbauer, who was the goalie coach at Princeton with me, and an offensive coach, and obviously the assistant head coach at North Carolina now. I don't even know if they know how to describe my style at some point. I was they would tell you I was fundamentally sound, but I was a flopper, is what I've heard sometimes. So a little bit different than the upright. I flopped on the ground a bunch on the lower shots. I played a different arc. So as all goalies know, they always teach you about this arc, right, at the goal. So, we teach everyone from pipe to pipe. It looks like a half moon, and you kind of keep your feet on the half moon as you go around the arc. And so amazingly enough, by the time I got to college, I actually didn't play with any arc. I kept my heels actually on the goal line. And so I played from the goal. I played from the inside out. And so from the goal line, I then moved from there as I attacked the ball. And the reason why I did that was I felt as if I was quick enough, and it gave me an extra second or two, not a second or two, but whatever, to save the ball. I'd have a little extra time to see the ball come out of somebody's stick, right? As opposed to, there's a lot of great goalies that played a really high arc, right? So they were really close to, they're almost like, I saw guys used to save balls almost near the crease line. That's how high of an arc they played. Think of me as someone who played basically in the back of the goal, and then I would work my way out. And as I said, I think I was fundamentally sound, but I was, as I said, I kind of flopped. I used my body a lot. I saved a lot of balls with my feet for some odd reason, but I could kick save the ball with my foot. Half the time it missed my stick, which I don't know if that's a good sign or not. So I don't know. I don't know if it's a style or not, but I certainly figured it out by the time, and it was an evolution too. By the time I got to college.
That'd be an interesting thing.
So I think you look at St. Paul's, at St. Paul's, I think I was the way I was taught at St. Paul's, and I think the beginnings of the way I was thinking about playing goalie was, as I said, very fundamentally sound. It was like textbook. Like if you read books about goalies, that's how they taught you. That's how I played. And then as I got to my senior year, and then as I got to Princeton, and really with Dave Metzbauer, who was the assistant coach at Princeton, and a wonderful friend of mine to this day, along with Bill Tierney. We talked a lot about being a goalie in college and the differences about high school and being a goalie in college. Look, when you get to college, what happens? They shoot the ball faster. They're better athletes. It comes at different angles. There's a whole variety. Everybody on the offensive side can shoot the rock quite good. So like there's things that start going on, and so we that's kind of when we started coming up with this whole theory of let's play at the goal line and be almost, my back many times would hit. My back would almost be hitting the net. And then I would kind of attack the ball from there as I could see it better. So it evolved, and I think it just evolved because of the game that we were, the college game. You had to be much quicker and do a lot more homework on people when you were there.
Yeah. One of the things I noticed about you is that quickness. I mean, you'll be upright in that stance, and then like low shot. I mean, like you said, your whole body just goes to it, and it's kind of the first goalie I've ever seen kind of make that like kick save, where you're kind of like getting that leg out there as an extra impediment or an extra thing that could make a save. Where did that quickness come from? Is that natural, or is that something you spent quite a bit of time developing?
I mean, I guess it was a little bit natural, but I would say that we spent a lot of time, you talk about, the exercises and drills that goalies do, right? And so, in today's world, they've got, they put these rubber bands on goalies' feet, and maybe they're around their knees or their ankles, and they really work on their footwork, and something like that. Back when I was in high school, what they were doing is they were basically tying like rubber tubes, because we just didn't know, we didn't have bands back then, right? So they tie rubber tubes around your ankles to teach you the footwork, right? To take a step and then the next step follows. So I spent a lot of time doing those types of things, jumping rope. Dave Metzbauer, once again at Princeton, we'd go into the squash courts, and Dave would throw. I'd be facing the wall. I mean, this is 1990. This is 1990, fall of 1990. I'd be facing the wall, and he'd throw tennis balls or racket balls against the wall. I couldn't see it, hit the wall, and then I have to react to the ball, right? So we were, and then I have to get closer and closer to the wall. So we like, there was lots of things that we were. I want to say we were inventing at that point. You know, maybe Metzi was inventing that, but we were doing to get quicker and quicker and quicker, train the body to see that ball faster and faster and faster, and get your body to move. You know, I tell young goalies nowadays, you know, it's goalies today. Goalies are the mental part of it is about teaching your brain how to move your feet and your hands quick enough to certain parts to make a save, right? So, you know, how do you take your right foot and step towards the ball? Your left foot follows. Left foot, you know, steps to the board. Your right foot, right? So, you know, you should spend all this time on getting your brain so wired that when the ball is shot, you know, hip side away, how your left foot, I'm a right-hander, left foot, right foot follows, and you get your hip. Like, you should be spending all your time thinking about how you can do all that stuff, right? So that's that. You know, so does it mean I got quicker? I think I spent a lot of time trying to help myself get quicker, and I think I probably had some natural instincts that let me be quicker along the way.
Yeah. That's awesome. So that drill that you mentioned, I call it mystery shot, and I do it with goalies still today, where you're facing a wall and you kind of get the shot off the wall. That's awesome. You guys were so revolutionary back then.
As I said, this is 1990. I don't know if anybody was doing it back then. I think Metzi and I felt like we were like the originators of this whole thing, but we thought it was a great drill. We did a lot of, you know, ridiculous drills back in the day that I'm not sure if they helped or not, but we thought they did. So we did them.
Yeah. And I love the rubber tubes, the original resistance bands.
That's exactly right. When I tell you these were like, you know, it might've been like, you know, water tubes that we cut and we tied together. So they truly weren't meant to put around people's ankles to make them fast.
Right. And then you mentioned playing the flat arc, you know, kind of heels on the goal line, which is interesting because I had Trevor Tierney on the show, by the way, and we talked about he said how much he learned from you, and that was kind of one of the elements is playing that deep arc, and it's a debate that I've had with, you know, a bunch of goalies, because a lot of goalies have their own style, and a lot of different styles work for each goalie. But it is interesting. Like, I don't think I could do a deep arc just because I'm 5'8". Like, I don't know. I don't take up that much space. You know what I mean? So I do need to kind of come out and make myself appear a little bit bigger to the shooter and rely on my quickness. But I know a lot of goalies like that flat arc really works for them.
Yeah. So Trevor Tierney, so when I got to Princeton, Trevor Tierney was about yay big. He was just a youngster.
Yeah.
He was,
but he was in the locker room with you guys all the time, right?
He was. So I always say, like, you hear about the gym rats, right?
Yeah.
So Trev was on the field with us with his dad all the time, and what a great person, and became a goalie. and became a phenomenal goalie at Princeton, and did great things. But boy, he was a observer as a young person like I've never seen before. And he soaked up a lot of things that his dad and I used to talk about, Metzi and I used to talk about. He was the kid that would kind of stand in the corner and he listened. And it certainly served him quite well. To your question about, you know, every goalie needs, you know, any person who tries to tell a goalie, this is the way you're going to play, I disagree with. Every goalie has to have their own way. And so to your point, you know, you said you're 5'9", and so that might entail a higher arc. And You might have, a 6'3" behemoth who can play, heels on the goal line and back. Nobody knows the answers until you have a goalie and you kind of let them figure out what best suits them. And then have them do that. But they got to feel good about being in the goal, what they're doing. And then I think you kind of go from there. I think it's really hard telling a goalie, this is what you're going to do, without having them kind of figure it a little bit out on their own.
Yeah. 100% agree. 100% agree. Kind of going back to that photo, you've got those classic, signature black sweats. Where were you? I haven't seen other goalies of that time wear it. Why did you start wearing those sweats?
Sweats everyone has asked me this question many times. It's a very easy answer. I started wearing sweats when I first started playing goalie. And the reason why I wore sweats was because it took a little bit of the sting out of the ball when it hit you in the legs. And that is the sole reason why I wore sweats. And then, like anything else, you do it, when I was a 7th grader and an 8th grader and a 9th grader and 10th grader, it just became that I just wore sweats. And so when I got to college, I wore sweats, and, not many kids, I guess, wear sweats anymore. I guess some do, some don't.
Some do,
not quite sure.
Some do. I encourage kids to do it just for that reason you said it. It
Yeah,
takes the
as I
sting
said,
out.
it just it's a little bit. And by the way, when it was 38 degrees at Princeton, New Jersey in February, when we were just starting our season, it took a little bite out of the ball when it was hitting you. So that's the sole reason why it served me well. It didn't feel good when it was 100 degrees out in some of these games we played, but I had to do it, but that's the only reason why I wore sweats. That's it. And then of course, I became superstitious with them, obviously.
Yeah. What about your hands? The way you set up with your hands? Because to me, it's very unique. Like a lot of goalies nowadays, like set up, they've got kind of their hands out and like almost their palm is kind of like facing the shooter. And when you kind of look at you, it's almost like it's really relaxed. That's kind of the first thing I see. And then almost like you almost got like a super loose grip on the top and your fingers kind of pointing out. Like, was that? I imagine you're just trying to be relaxed and loose as possible so that when you see the shot, you can explode, right?
Exactly. So, I mean, that was, my hands and my stance and my preparation was all predicated on being as comfortable as possible. And comfortable, when I say comfortable and then being in anticipation of saving a ball. I see what they do to goalies these days, and they really teach these, the popping of the hands out. And I just couldn't do it. I can't have my hands out the way they teach them now and punching out and doing all that stuff. I feel so stilted when I hear goalie coaches talk about that. And I'm not saying it's wrong. It didn't work for me. I tell goalies, have your hands that are in a comfortable spot. I mean, you can't have them too low, you can't have them too high, but put them in a spot that makes them feel comfortable. And the other thing I would tell you is that I'm still surprised to this day, but I tell every goalie, you have to have your knees bent a little bit, right? Like in an anticipation, kind of like not a crouch, but like your knees need to be bent. And the reason why was, my father. So my dad never played lacrosse. He doesn't know a thing about lacrosse. He was a great baseball player, but he knows nothing about lacrosse. But my dad was a very good athlete. And so when I started playing goalie, I think I was playing very upright. He was like, I don't understand. He's like, it looks like you bend your knee. The first thing you do when you save a ball is bend your knees. He's like, so why don't you just bend your knees first? Be ready with your bent knees. So, I ultimately, got into where my knees were somewhat bent, because that was the first thing you would do as a goalie, is bend your knees before you step towards the ball. But getting back to your hands, to me, it's about being as comfortable as you possibly can find.
Got it. Yeah, that's what I figured. Cool. So then I guess at one point, did you realize like, hey, I'm pretty good at this. Like I could probably play at the next level.
Yeah. Um, I tell you, once again, very, very etched in my mind, there was a camp. So between my sophomore and junior year in high school, they had a camp called the Top 205 camp. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Top 205 camp, but the Top 205 camp, it was the first time they ever had it. And it was it was predicated on, it was going to find the 205 best high school players, and it was going to be an invite only. So it was run by Bill Tierney, Dave Cottle, and Tony Seaman, and it was at Loyola College. And so you had to be, your high school coach had to nominate you to come to this camp. And so that first year, it was 205 undergraduates who showed up, and they had X amount of attackmen, midfielders, and defensemen, and they had, 20 goalies, let's say, or something like that. And it was awesome because it was like in the morning, it was all position training. And then the afternoon and at nights, it was just games. They put you on a team, and it was like, go get them and roll the ball out. And we're going to go play. And this was back at Loyola College, back at their old field. So anyway, fast forward, we get done with the camp, and they had an MVP they had a lot of different awards. And so between my sophomore and my junior year, I won the MVP of the camp.
Wow.
And so I remember, we were up in the stands, and there's 205 kids, and MVP is Scott Bacigalupo. So I walked down, they gave me like a little lacrosse ball. And I think I kind of was like, whoa, that was interesting. I might be pretty good at this sport. And I think I probably garnered some attention from a bunch of college coaches at that point. And so I think I started realizing that I could be pretty good at this, and maybe I should think about pursuing it in college.
Awesome. That's a great story. And so Bill Tierney was running that. I mean, he obviously got a good look at you there. Is that where your recruiting process started, or like, what was the recruiting process like for you, and why did you end up going with Princeton?
Great question. So recruiting processes back then are different than recruiting processes today. You really weren't recruited until, you got to your junior, you got to your quite frankly, between your junior and your senior year is when you got recruited. And so coaches back then, they didn't really reach out that much. And so fast forward between my junior and senior year. So the next summer we had the Top 205 camp again. I went, and June 1st is the first day back then you could start actively recruiting a kid. And so on July 1st. And so when we were at the camp, Bill was there, every coach was there. And so my recruiting process was, let me just call my recruiting process very blessed. I had Willie Scroggs at Carolina offer me the Moorhead Scholarship, which is a full ride for Carolina. I had Ace Adams at UVA offer me the Jeffersonian Scholarship, which is a full ride, but it was academic and athletic. And Johns Hopkins at that point was coached by named by the guy of Don Zimmerman, and they offered me a scholarship, full ride, amongst a bunch of people. So the game was on. I had them, coming and watching me play and calling me. There was no email back then. So like there was a lot of phone calls on the rotary phone every night, talking to coaches. And so anyway, Bill recruited me. He came to a lot of my football games. He came to a lot of my basketball games. At that time, this was big when they would come and they would have dinner with your family.
Oh, wow.
So Willie Scroggs and Don Zimmerman and Ace Adams and Bill and a whole bunch of others that come and sit down. My mom would make dinner. We'd all sit down at the dinner table, and we'd all have dinner together and talk. Princeton at that point was, I think someone had put it best, Princeton at that point was 8th in a 7-team league. That's how bad they were. But Bill is as everyone knows now, is a pretty magical guy. And he he recruited me. He was by far the most thoughtful recruiter of me because he said a couple of things. One, he said I'd start for 4 years, which I thought that was appealing. And not to say the other colleges didn't, but Bill was adamant that I would play for 4 years for him. And then two, Bill rightfully recruited my parents. And I would tell you, you know, it didn't strike me because I was 18 and stupid back then. But, you know, Bill's pitch back then was, look, lacrosse is great, but, you know, your son probably needs to get an education along the way, because when he gets done with college, it's not like there's pro lacrosse. So he's got to think of something else to go do in life. And so Princeton might be a good place for him to contemplate. And so all of those things kind of conspired to get me to consider Princeton when it was a losing program. And oh, by the way, when I decided to go to Princeton, which was February of my senior year, the first game of the season was always Princeton Hopkins. So I had to call. So my father made me call all the coaches and tell them I wasn't going to come to their programs. And then at the end of that night, I had to call Bill Tierney and say I'm going to come to Princeton. And I would say that all the coaches were so gracious. One of them was not. And that one coach said, you know, we'll show you. And so Princeton played Hopkins the first game of the season, and Hopkins ran up the score. I think that Hopkins beat him like 20-8. And the commentary was, you're the dumbest person we've ever met. Why would you ever go to Princeton? You could have come to Hopkins. And it was a little shocking, but look, you know, Coach T figured it all out for all of us. But that was my recruiting process, and T really, you know, he was very thoughtful about how he spoke to me and my parents, and there was not one thing that he said to me that didn't come true, and there's not one thing that he ever went back on when I stepped on campus. Wow. And Damon, I'll tell you another story about Bill Tierney and what kind of person he is, because he's a personal friend and I mean, just a father figure. I don't even know if he's a father figure anymore. I'm so old. I guess I'm more like his age now than not. But you know, so let me fast forward for everybody out there. So Bill Tierney recruits me. There was 10 of us in our class at Princeton going, and he recruited one of the greatest, you know, recruiting classes in the history of Princeton. And the data would tell you that of 10 of us, 7 of us became All-American. So that tells you how good he did in the class of 94. But so let's fast forward. So my senior year in high school, he's recruited me. I've committed. I'm going to Princeton. And at the end of that season, so I haven't shown up for my freshman year yet. At the end of the season, Hopkins fires Don Zimmerman. And Coach Tierney was the assistant coach at Hopkins before he went to Princeton to become the head coach. And so, as you all know, Bill was the #1 choice for Hopkins to come back to become the head coach. And so that summer, he calls me and we meet at Loyola College at the Top 205 camp. And we go for a walk. And T says to me, it's all true. Hopkins wants me. And we had a long chat. And it was like a really like, I mean, like, maybe I was wise. I'm not quite sure, but like we had a really like intense talk about him going to Hopkins. Think about Hopkins in 1990, hotbed, national championships. It's Hopkins. That's what it was. That's where you go. Chickaroonies, all of them. That's where you go, and that's what Tierney talking about. And so at the end of the conversation, I said, T, I totally understand why you would go to Hopkins. Like, I get it. It's good for your family. It's good. I get it. Totally. I said, I have one but for you. And the but is this. You're a liar. You recruited me. You told me you'd be here for 4 years. And I will choose probably not to ever speak to you again because of that. And I'm 18 and tease whatever. And he kind of looked at me and we kind of went back and forth a little bit. And I said, I'm just telling you, that's how I feel. And about 3 or 4 or 5 days later, T called me and we met up and he said, I'm staying. I'm staying because I think I can do something very special with Princeton. And he said, he ended it by saying, and by the way, don't ever call me a liar again. And I said, okay, I'll never do that again. And off we went.
Oh, what a great story.
And so the man, Bill Tierney, I don't, and I know this is not your questions and I apologize, but Bill, people talk about John Wooden in basketball, right? I mean, John Wooden in basketball. Bill Tierney is that. He's not even John Wooden. He's just Bill Tierney of lacrosse. And I cannot tell you how special of a man he is and what he did for the program at Princeton. And more importantly, what he did for all the players that went through. I mean, he was a coach. He was tough. There was a lot of, days that you didn't know, but boy, oh boy, you can't argue with the results that he had and the men that went through that program and where a lot of us are these days. And that's because of T and what he did. And I can't, he's so special. It's just comical versus everybody else, quite frankly.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that story. That's great. Tierney's one of the, then he went over to Denver and, duplicated the success and did it all over again, so it's just unbelievable.
Unbelievable. I have parents who call me and they say, hey, my kid's deciding between something and Bill Tierney. I'm like, really? Are you really telling me this?
You're really asking me what my answer is?
Right. Are you out of your minds? This is an easy one, but anyway.
Yeah. So you get to Princeton and I'm always fascinated because lacrosse goalies need to be the leader of the team, or let's just put it this way, the team is better when the lacrosse goalie is the leader. In my opinion. And you get there and you're an 18-year-old kid and you're a freshman, right? And so how do you go about being the leader of this team that's already established when, you're this young kid?
Yeah. The truthful answer is I wasn't the leader. As a freshman, Coach T and Metzi basically said, your job is to go stop the ball and do it as best as you possibly can. And then the other answer is that you want to talk about being blessed, but we had great senior leadership and quite frankly, junior leadership on that team. And so if you think about what was going on, my freshman year was 91. And now the turn had started at Princeton, right? We went from this losing team to the year before they were a winning team, barely. And now my freshman year, the momentum's starting. And so we had, captains like David Gaines and Mike Mariano and Andrew Moe and Justin Tortolani, who were the class of 92. So they were juniors when I was a freshman, who they were the leaders. And so it made my job as a freshman quite easy. Go save the ball, go direct traffic on defense, don't screw up. We'll take care of the rest. And so they were the ones that really provided that leadership. So so these freshmen, there was 10 of us, as I said. By the way, when we played Johns Hopkins my freshman year, 6 of us started.
Wow.
6 of us were on the field when we started. And so, it made our jobs easy because we had senior leadership that could really, handle 18-year-olds who we didn't know what the hell was going on back then. And, they helped us along the way. So it was a great chemistry, and it worked incredibly well.
Yeah. And that's probably good advice for, coaches or goalies thinking about leadership and being a goalie. I mean, it's a lot to deal with, and you're the only one that can make saves. Like, other people on the team can be a leader and help you run the D, but at the end of the day, you're the only one that can make saves. So if you feel like that's too much for that goalie, and for some goalies it is, some goalies it's not. Like, some goalies can handle all that, and I'm sure by the time you got a little more age, like you were right there. You were probably a leader of the team.
So real quick, every goalie, their number one job when they walk on the field is just save the ball. Don't do anything else but just save the ball. And then when you can do that, then you can start managing the defense. And when you can manage the defense, you then can lead the team, right? So I'll put it to you differently. By my senior year in college, I tell younger goalies or kids growing up, I almost could close my eyes and run the defense. I could close my eyes and run the defense because I was that comfortable knowing where the slides were coming, the calls that needed to be made, who had to go where. You could articulate that because you had done it so much, and then I knew how to save the ball, I knew how to run the defense, and then I knew how to be a leader. But it takes time, right? Yeah. It doesn't happen on day one.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw this video of Coach Bill Tierney talking. I think it was for your Hall of Fame induct speech, and he basically said, like, in 1991, your first year, right? Like, you guys lose in overtime to Towson. You're coming off the field, and he said, he looked at me, speaking about you, right? He looked at me in the eye and he said, "Coach, we will never lose another overtime game again in my career." Do you kind of remember that moment?
We were walking off. It was Towson State. We lost 14-13 in triple overtime. I was a freshman. We played at the old Palmer Stadium. They did a pick play and a man up in triple overtime, and we lost. And we were so close, and I remember being so upset. And as I said, we were walking off, and by the way, T was having his arm around me, consoling me, saying, "It wasn't your fault. Like, you're the best." And I was so angry. I said to him, I said, I'm never doing this again. I'm never losing an overtime ever again. We're just not going to do this. In 92, we beat Brown in overtime. We beat Cornell in overtime. And then we obviously beat Cuse in double overtime to win the championship. And then my senior year, we win a couple overtime games, of which culminates in beating Virginia in overtime. And so I forget what it was, but it ended up being I think we went 5 or 6 years without losing an overtime after that. And I'm not saying it was because of me, but what I would say is that we learned as a team to when we needed to bear down. And obviously when you're in overtime, you have to bear down a lot. And so with great players and understanding that, we learned, but we learned the hard way because as I said, we had to lose in triple overtime. But that was, once again, the evolution of a program. Here's Princeton. We were terrible. Now we were getting better. And then 1991, we get to the quarterfinals. We played Towson State, and we were the better team, but we lost. And so it hurt. But that was I look at the Towson State game as the greatest loss at Princeton, because I felt like it was the game that it taught us how to win, because we were so upset that we lost. And so that's part of the reason why I guess I said that to T, and we lived up to it. So that was fortunate for us.
You really did. That's pretty awesome. So after going into the off season after that triple overtime loss, was it like a new attitude? Was it the kind of same old training regiment, or how did you guys approach then the following season as a team?
Yeah. So it wasn't, it was just, it was an attitude game. we only lost a few seniors from that class. So let's just say the whole team was back. And by the way, so there was an attitude, and let's be clear, we started out the next year in 1992. We lose to Hopkins in the first game. We beat Virginia, then we lose to Carolina. So now we're 1-2.
Mm-hmm.
And then we go play a Rutgers team who, we've handled in the past, and we beat them by 1, let's say. It was freezing cold. And so now we're 2-2. We've lost to Hopkins and Carolina. We've only beat Rutgers by 1. And we hadn't played our best lacrosse. Mm. And I think the attitude was, okay, let's get going, everybody. Like, it's time to kind of push. And we just went on a roll at that point. And once again, this is Coach Tierney and Metzi, and once again, this evolution of this lacrosse program, where we just became. 3 years ago, they would lose one goal games. Now we're winning 1 goal games or 2 goal games. And so it was the attitude. We just, we figured it all out as a team.
Yeah. Love
and
it.
it obviously culminated into a great season.
Yeah. And you guys end up making the finals and play Syracuse. What was that like for you? I mean, I think there was like 26,000 people at that game. I mean, it had to be like the biggest stage that you had ever played on. Did you deal with nerves? Yeah.
So, I mean, back up for a second. We played Carolina in the semifinals. So we obviously lost to them at the beginning of the season. We played Carolina in the semifinals. It's 120 degrees at Franklin Field. And Carolina was a great game because if you think about Princeton lacrosse leading up to the Carolina game, here's how Princeton lacrosse worked. Our offense was, we threw the ball around in a circle for a little bit. We might throw it to the middle, and then maybe somebody kicks the ball into the goal. Like, it was just this, like, I don't know. It was just, we slowed the ball down, right? So Coach Tierney back then, as everybody knows, we were possession. So we took care of the possession. There was no shot clock back then. So we'd run our offense. It would take 5 minutes for us to run. We were very, very, prescriptive about how we did things. So then we show up to Carolina, and we all know Carolina has just great athletes. They can run up down the field. They got 3 midfield lines. Everybody's a high school American. And so before that game, T says to us in the locker room, he says, if you think we're going to hold the ball and play, kind of the keep away, you're out of your mind. We're going to run with them. And it was T basically saying to us, we have just as many horses and athletes as they do, and let's go toe to toe. And so we go toe to toe with Carolina, and we ended up winning in the semis. And it was a great game. And then we show up for Cuse. And so like, once again, that feeling of we can go toe to toe against anybody. And so for Syracuse, it was like they had great athletes, and we kind of felt like, so do we. And so let's run with them. And no one's, we don't have to play some Princeton slowdown style to win. We don't have to kind of manipulate the clock. Let's just go. And that's kind of the way the Syracuse game went. So I don't think we were nervous. I don't think the crowd concerned us. I think we had been a part of the big stage, and we were ready. We were ready to win. Now I almost screwed it all up for everybody at the end, but like, we were ready to win. So.
You alluded to that play at the end. So, if somebody hasn't seen that game, I'll give a brief description of what I saw, and then I want to kind of hear your side of the story. So Princeton's up by 1 goal with a minute left and the ball
9-8
right? and man up, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Damon, you've set the stage quite well.
Okay. All right. No shot clock. So all you have to do is run out the clock. 1 minute left. And the ball's at X, and it's a midi on him, right? And so he starts like fiercely checking, and bam, lands a check. The ball goes flying out, and it pops right into a Syracuse guy's stick. He turns around, throws it to a long pole, who just Gilmans it all the way down the field. Just chucks it. And then here comes Batch, comes out to get it. And it looks like you try and like quick stick it. Like, I'm going to go for a quick stick and just throw it away. Pops out right into the Syracuse guy's stick. There's a defender trying to block the goal, but he just gives him a little like dip and dunk and bam, tie game.
You got it. So it's funny. The great thing about playing lacrosse back then is there's not a ton of video back then. So it's not like it's well versed. So I don't think people have seen it. But I say it now because we won. It was the Bill Buckner of lacrosse plays, right? If you think about it, it was the Bill Buckner of lacrosse plays. We were man up, they Gilmaned it, they threw it down. You're exactly right. I came out of the cage, I think rightfully so. I caught the ball, and as everybody knows, except for obviously me at that point, balls hit turf, they've got the spin. And as I caught it to throw it, and all I needed to do was to throw it right back down, it spun out of my stick. Tom Marechek, All-American, Hall of Famer, picked up the ball. He dipped and dunked it in with about 40 some odd seconds left in the game, tie game 9-9. And so it's horrible. I mean, this is a horrible event. And especially for a goalie. So anyway, it's a great moment. And people always ask me, what are like your most special moments in life? That was actually a special moment in my life. And the reason why I say it was a special moment in my life was the game ends, obviously, and we go into the huddle. And, I got people staring at me like, whoa, that was awful what you just did. And Coach Tierney walked in the huddle, and he points at me and he goes, I want to make sure everybody understands we aren't in the Final Four if it wasn't for Batch. Now let's move on. Yeah. And I was like, I was like stunned. Yeah. And by the way, I'm looking up into the crowd. Okay. I'm looking up in the crowd. My mom's crying. My dad's looking at me like shaking his head like, I can't believe this. Like, you're an idiot. And I got this crazy Coach T, screaming, but like he said it straight. And so it got my head straight. And by the way, there was 40 some odd guys on the team that are now hugging me, and we go out. And if you look at the game at that point, Syracuse wins the faceoff, and they had the ball for the first couple of minutes of the first overtime. And we played great defense, and I made a bunch of saves, and I got my head screwed on straight, and then we ended up winning. So look, we won. And so it's easy for me to say this, but it was a wonderful moment of going from such calamity to a coach and a team saying, we got your back. Mm-hmm. And it's awesome. And it is an experience I will never ever forget, from what they did for me.
Yeah. Wow. That's a great story. It's a great story. And for kids out there listening, it's a huge learning moment as well, because, maybe you're not playing in the national championship game, right? But, that moment will happen where you give up a goal, like an easy one that you should have saved. And you're going to start feeling like probably some of those same feelings that you had when you made that error, right? Yep. Like, oh, I just blew it for the team. I can't believe this. But like, it's not about that setback. It's about the comeback. And like, you've got to mentally have that in your mind so that when that bad moment happens, I can shake it off and just keep playing like I know how I'm capable of.
Totally. I'll give you, so I'll go back to my father for my second. So my dad coined it. My dad has coined the greatest thing for a goalie, I believe, in terms of, and I was a very emotional goalie. But he coined it great. And he told me this before my first game, which was at Hopkins as a freshman. He said, son, you have to be, so when you make a bunch of saves, don't get too high. And when you let a couple in, don't get too low. Like you have to kind of have this static emotion. You can't let yourself get too excited or too upset as a goalie. And it served, I was emotional, but I never let a goal against me affect me. And I'll give you a great example. And I don't even know if they can do it as goalies these days. But when somebody scored on me, I never picked up the ball out of the back of the net. The referee went to go get the ball. And the whole purpose was, I don't want to go dig the ball out of the back of the net because I just let it in because I'm embarrassed or whatever. And I gotta feel it. Like the ball went in, I walked away, ref picked it up, I reset my mindset, and we went back in again. And so this is back to like, as a goalie, you got to be able to erase giving up goals. You can't get too low, right? 1 goes in, 2 goes in, 3 goes in. Holy crap, what's going on? What's going on? What's going on? Bad thing happens. You just have to be able to erase it, have the face-off occur, and now you're back playing again. And that to me, mentally, that's the mental exercise goalies have to do to be successful these days. And I think that's what the best ones can do.
Yeah. How do you do that? It's so much easier said than done, isn't it? Like it's one thing to say like, hey, don't get too low. And then, man, you let up a goal or man, you have a run of 2 or 3 games. And now all of a sudden, like, I'm not attacking the ball the way I know how, Did you ever go through a, 3-time goalie of the year, All-American, all 4 years? Did you ever go through a bad stretch?
Absolutely went through a bad stretch. And as I said, the beginning of my sophomore year. So, I only gave up double-digit goals, like, I don't know, 5 times in my career in college, 5 or 6 times, tops. Maybe it was 5. And so my barometer was keeping people below 10 goals. Like that was my big barometer when I was in college. Like if you can keep them to 9, we can win. And that was just based on facts and like knowing that, and, hopefully keeping them lower than that. And so my sophomore year, as I kind of said before, we lose to Hopkins 15-14. I mean, that's like letting in 15 goals to me is like, I want to go hang myself. Like that's awful.
Yeah.
And then we lost to Carolina 9-8, and Rutgers, I let in another 10. We won 11-10. And so, yeah. And interestingly enough, to your point, it just made me, you have to fight that feeling. It's like quicksand. Like when you're letting in all these goals, you just like, the harder you try, the worse it gets, or you can't mentally get yourself around. It just, you have to fight all of that. You have to just be positive. You have to wake up every day and say, I'm going to start saving the ball, or, like, I gave up these goals. I'm going to go figure this thing out. I'm going to go work on this. I'm going to get my defense to make sure they're shooting in a different way. And so you certainly, as a goalie, I think, and, others can correct me, you definitely go through some slumps, and you got to fight through it mentally. And it's hard, but you have to do it. By the way, being a goalie, so look, it's physical, right? You have to be quick. You have to have step. In my mind, if you have the mental abilities to do it, that's, to me, is almost half the battle. It might be more than half the battle.
Yeah.
Find me someone who's mentally resolute to play the sport or the position, and I bet you'd find some great goalies along the way, because that's really where that could be the difference.
Yeah. What's so interesting about that is I agree with you. I think that being a goalie is, it's at least like more than 50% mental. And yet, like, how many goalies out there like really train the mental game? You know what I mean? Like, if it's more than 50% mental, like your training is probably 90% taking shots and working on your stance and doing all these things that are not mental. For you mentioned that chat with your dad about kind of remaining even keel, not getting too high, not getting too low. Were there any other things that you did to kind of work the mental game?
No, I think the mental part was just experiences that you go through, right? Like I'll give you two, right? I mean, Towson State losing in triple overtime my freshman year, right? That's mentally challenging as a goalie. Okay. And how do you deal with all of that? Coming off the field and telling T, we're not doing that again. Like, we're not losing that way. In high school, my sophomore year in high school, I was on the varsity team at this point, we were horrendous. And when I say bad, and this is St. Paul's, we're supposed to be like the premier school, and we were getting killed. We lost our homecoming game 14-1 versus Loyola, right? So we just, it was bad. And I was a starting goalie. And I think those types of things make you mentally strong, right? If you can lose and get scored on, and you can learn, and you come back, and these experiences kind of shape you as you go along your journey, I think that's the only way you can mentally challenge yourself. And I think that's where you learn, do you have the mental strength to kind of persevere? Because goalies is about perseverance, right? It's about perseverance. It's a long game, and you have to persevere. So I think there's inflection points and journeys along the way that if you have to learn from. I mean, learning from 1992, and I could have been the Bill Buckner if we lost, and we end up winning. That's a learning experience, and you have to, if you can deal with that, then you can deal with a lot of things, I think, probably with what I had done.
I love it. You could have been the Bill Buckner, but instead you're the Scott Bacigalupo.
But yeah, right.
Of lacrosse goalies.
Little known fact.
And another cool thing that Coach Bill Tierney said in your Hall of Fame inductee speech, right? I don't know if it was the speech, but just the video, is he is Princeton lacrosse. What do you think that means?
I think you'd have to ask him. I'm not quite sure. I think T. I'm not sure what T meant. I think what he was saying, what he was implying was, it may not have been just me. I would just say that my class, that 1994 class. Let's think about my 1994 class, right? Kevin Lowe. Mm-hmm. I'm biased. Greatest attackman ever to play. Hall of Fame. And then, as I mentioned, all these All-Americans we had: Pete Ramsey and Paul Murphy and Taylor Simmers and Brian Tomio and Scott Reinhardt. I mean, the Princeton 1992. We win the national championship. It's the first time a different team other than Hopkins, Carolina, and UVA had won the national championship, and Syracuse in like 20 years. To pick some number. It was crazy, right? Like, everyone's like, who are these geeks, nerds? Like, what happened here? Like, why did this happen? And then we win my senior year in 1994, and then obviously they go on to great things after that. So I just think it was about it was about the inflection of Princeton lacrosse and what we did as a class, as a team. I clearly was a part of it. I was the goalie, and I think obviously that's special, being the goalie of that team and accomplishing what I did, but more importantly, accomplishing what the team did. So I think, him saying that I embodied, like, I just think it was just, that was what was going on with it, with the team in general. And, I was just a part of it at that point.
Yeah. Awesome. And then, so I imagine, back in, you graduated in 1994. I imagine if the PLL had existed, you would have gone on to play professional lacrosse.
I guess, I'm not quite sure.
Yeah.
It wasn't an option. Back then they were just, it was more club lacrosse. It was club lacrosse back then. and there really wasn't a pro outlet. And so I got done my senior year, and I think I actually had done some thinking, and I made a concerted effort that my lacrosse career was done. And this was partly based on, Bill Tierney and Dave Metzbauer and I talking about this, but like, and I actually still believe this today. I think college lacrosse, the Final Four, is still the pinnacle of the sport. I think the Final Four, Memorial Day weekend, is the pinnacle. I know there's pro lacrosse now, PLL. I think it's wonderful, but the last time I checked, that Final Four, they fill those stadiums and ESPN, and that to me is the top. And pro lacrosse is wonderful, and it's a way to have a career. I don't think there's a way to really have a viable like career in pro lacrosse yet. But back up to when I came out. So I come out in '94. There's no pro lacrosse. There's club lacrosse. I just won 2 national championships. I'd won my senior year. And so, do I really want to go play club lacrosse? Right? And club lacrosse to me was a bunch of men, older. Some took it serious, some didn't take it serious. Yeah, there may or may not be a keg party afterwards. You don't know, but like, it's hard. In my mind, there's 2 things. It's hard to play for Bill Tierney and win national championships, and then show up and play club lacrosse with a bunch of whoever's, wherever, right?
Right.
That's hard. 2, I graduated from Princeton, and I'm like, I got to go have a career, and I can't make money playing pro lacrosse. So like, I ultimately went to Wall Street. I went to Wall Street and worked at Merrill Lynch for a long period of time. That was like my next step. Like, I would guess I was supposed to use my academics and go do something with my life at that point. So that's why I really never played ever again. I mean, I really just didn't ever play again. I was done.
Well, it's got to be tough. I mean, like you said, you're at this pinnacle of playing, such elite level lacrosse with great. I mean, there's no way you can ever recreate that atmosphere that is college lacrosse, and like, the camaraderie and like, just everything about it. So I certainly sympathize with how you're feeling. And like you, I also went and made a career, Professional lacrosse was, I didn't even play D1. So, I always knew I had a career was waiting for me.
Right.
Well, this has been so much fun. I got a couple of silly questions for you. So every goalie's got kind of a worse spot to take one to get hit. What was yours? Did you have one?
A worse spot to take one. No, I'll tell you the worst spot I ever got one though, I guess.
All right.
In practice in college, we were practicing, and one guy, I forget who it was, he hit the crossbar and it hit the back of my neck, so below the helmet. And it hit me so hard that I couldn't hear. And I was struggling, just struggling mentally at this point. And so I had to spend a night in the hospital because I was kind of like out of sorts. So that was the worst spot.
There you go. So you're on back of the neck. Back of the neck.
The back of the neck. And the other one was great goalies. We all talk about great shots. Who have the great shots or the one. So let's go back to Towson State. So Towson State had a guy by the name of Glenn Smith. I'm sure many people in the lacrosse will remember him, but Glenn Smith was a great attackman. And if anybody ever asked me who the best shooter was, it was Glenn Smith. And Glenn had a shot like he could put it anywhere. And so at the end of the game, when we were playing them, my freshman year. There was a couple seconds left in just the regular game at the end of the fourth quarter. They had a fast break. Glenn catches it at point and takes about 3 hops from about 10 yards out and fires this thing. And by the way, he had like 4 goals. He was hitting corners. I couldn't even catch up. But anyway, he fires this one, and I don't know what happens, but it hits me right in the face mask, right here. In the video, it's kind of cool because the ball lands at midfield, and the game ends this way. And unbeknownst to everybody is that now what happened was it hit me so hard that, you know, the old helmets back then, it came down and the bridge of the helmet broke the bridge of my nose. It also popped all my my chin straps, the 4-point, they all popped off. And in addition, Glenn knocked, so in your sinuses, he knocked all the snot out of my sinuses, out of my nose. And so I am walking off the field. Now it's tied 13-13. And I'm walking off the field past Glenn, and he's looking at me. And I have, my chin straps are off. My nose is bleeding. And I have literally mucus and snot all on my face mask and all over me. And he kind of looked at me like he did one of these things. And I'm like, I don't even know what's going on at this point. Like, I just got to go back to the huddle and like clean myself up. So it wasn't the worst place to get hit, but it was one of the worst things I had to experience as a goalie that we all have to experience sometimes.
That's a great story. I wish you would have given him a smooth one-liner as you walk by, you know?
No, there was no one-liner for that. It was just like trying to get my chin strap back on and get the crap off my face mask at that point. So there's no one-liner for him.
All right. And then what head are you playing with? You mentioned the old Baccarat helmets,
yeah, sure.
with the shoelaces in the back that tied up.
You got it. You got
like
it.
a little floppy foam, what's it called? The throat guard. And then is that next to Goalmaster that you played with?
In terms of my goalie stick?
The stick, yeah.
Oh, Jesus. I couldn't even tell you what my head was, Damon. Like, I don't know what it was, but I will tell you this though. My shaft, I played with a crooked arrow wooden shaft. And so no one would ever play with a crooked arrow shaft, even back when I played. In today's world, they would never do it. But I loved the wooden shaft because it was heavy and it was very balanced. And so I hated having my head have more weight than my shaft. So the head felt heavier, the shaft felt lighter, right? I loved having that more balanced piece of having a shaft that was heavier, the feel, with the head. So it all kind of was balanced as I was moving it. So I used a crooked arrow as my shaft, and that my head, geez, I don't even know. I think I got it in my basement. I can go find it for you and tell you, but it was whatever it was.
You have to send us some pictures of it. You still have I'll send the picture of my stick. I'll send you a picture of my helmet, but you got the helmet right on. Yeah. Awesome. Well, cool. Look, Scott, thanks so much for coming on. This has been so much fun. I feel like we covered most everything. Was there anything that you were hoping that I was going to ask that we didn't talk about?
Not at all, Damon. As I said before we started this, super appreciative. I know you've sent me a bunch of emails, and as I said, I don't think a 49-year-old guy is all too interesting. But I'm happy we did this, and I'm thankful that you thought of me for doing something along this way. So all good.
Well, thank you for the time. I made a list at the beginning of the year, top 5 goalies I wanted to interview on this show, and you were on there.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
Number 2. So we got 2 out of 5 are done. 2 out of 5.
Who did you get so far? Who was the?
Well, I got you, and I got Quint Kesnich.
Oh, great. Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
Who talks for a living. So he was amazing. Not to say you weren't. This was absolutely stunning. Everyone's got their own stories, you know.
Quint was amazing. You got to get, geez, top five. Well, I'm probably not the right guy to ask. Larry
No,
Quinn.
you're the perfect guy to ask. This is great. I love where this is going.
Yeah.
Who are
Yeah,
top three people you think I should interview?
Geez, Larry Quinn, right? Larry Quinn was, I was certainly a role model for me. So Quinny, I think you got to put Sal Lacasio,
Yeah. Okay.
In that bucket. Unfortunately, Paul Schmoller, who passed away a couple of years ago, so was wonderful, and maybe Brian Doherty from Maryland might be the other one. So
I interviewed
everyone
Doc.
can debate.
He's awesome. I interviewed Doc.
There you go.
Yep. But Larry Quinn and Sal, I'm going to put on the list.
Larry Quinn and Sal. I think they are.
You know who else are my other three? It is on the women's side, Megan Taylor won the Tewaaraton from Maryland. Sure.
Absolutely. Geez, the women's side, I'm terrible. I should have mentioned the women's. Well, that would be awesome.
I sometimes forget too, but there's probably half my audience is women, maybe a little less, but there's a lot of women goalies who listen.
Yeah.
Tillman Johnson.
Sure. Tillman Johnson probably had the greatest Final Fours when he was at UVA.
Absolutely.
He went nuts for a couple of Final Fours.
And then the final one I have on the list is Oren Lyon.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Oren was Syracuse.
Yeah, he went to Syracuse.
Yeah. I'll tell you who the other one that would be super interesting for you, Damon, is he's a Princeton guy, so I'm a little biased, but Cookie Krongard. So you should put Cookie Krongard on your bucket list of folks. He might be the most interesting man alive. What's the Stella?
The most interesting
commercial.
Man in the world.
Yeah, that's Cookie. I mean, Cookie's had an amazing career, and Cookie, is the opposite of me. Cookie would come back to Princeton and play in the alumni games, and he was like 70 years old playing in the alumni game as a goalie, and I would be like, Cookie, this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen known to mankind. What are you doing? Yeah. And Cookie loved playing goalie, and he's a Hall of Famer. And oh, by the way, he became the Inspector General for the United States of America, which is an amazing position. And he is a super interesting guy. I'm not sure if he's in the top 5, but boy, he would be.
I'll put him on the list. He's on the list.
He'd be a fun guy. You tell me if you need access to him. I'll get him.
We'll figure it out.
I'll get him to do it for you.
All right, Scott, if you could leave the goalies out there with one final piece of advice, what would that be?
Don't do it. No, I'm just don't do it. Look, one piece of advice. So here's what I tell young goalies. One, I think goalie is the most special position on the field, and so you should feel special when you play goalie. There's only one player that plays goalie in that field. And so you should play that position with a lot of pride and understanding how special it is for your team. And then the other thing I would tell goalies is that, the reason why it's the hardest position is because, being scored upon is a tough thing to deal with. And Damon, we talked about this, but you really need to understand that it's about making as many saves as possible, not the goals that you let in. It's how many saves you make during a game and how you lead. And so that's really important for goalies to understand. Every time I see a goalie give up a goal and they put their head down and they start moping around, I always say, don't do that, because people see that. They understand that. They know you're down. They know the team's down. You're the goalie. You are the leader of this thing. To your goal is given up. Your head is held high. You talk to your defense. Here's what we're going to do, and you go back in. So you are the most special player. It's the most important position. and you are the leader in terms of like people are looking at you. Your actions matter. Keep your head up, be positive. The glass is half full, and that's how you have to play. That's how you have to play that position. I think that those are the things that I would impart upon folks when I think about the position of goalie.
Very well said, Scott. Thank you so much.
Damon, be well. Thank you so much, man. Appreciate it.